One of the great endeavors of archaeology is figuring out which events described in the Bible actually happened. Researchers in Turkey now claim they found indisputable evidence that the story of Noah's Ark. The team at Noah's Ark's Scans says this is the final resting place of Noah's Ark.
When a research team began excavating a mysterious formation in the mountains of eastern Turkey, they expected ordinary archaeological findings. Instead, their investigation quickly took a strange turn after advanced scanning tools revealed unexpected structures beneath the surface. To deepen the analysis, GROK AI, an artificial intelligence system designed to interpret complex scientific and geological data, was used to help process the radar results. What followed was a series of discoveries that challenged both scientific assumptions and long-standing historical interpretations, raising a question no one on the team was prepared to answer. The mountain that looks like a ship, and the mystery of Durupinar. The Durupinar Formation, located in eastern Turkey near Mount Ararat, has long been one of the most debated geological features in the region. From ground level, it appears to be an ordinary ridge of earth and rock, shaped by time and natural forces. But when viewed from above, especially through aerial photography and satellite imaging, it reveals something far more unusual. The formation closely resembles the outline of a massive ancient ship, stretching across the landscape in a way that feels almost deliberate. This striking shape has fueled decades of speculation and controversy. Some researchers and enthusiasts have suggested a possible connection to the biblical story of Noah's Ark, proposing that the formation might be the remains of the legendary vessel described in ancient texts. However, the majority of geologists and scientists maintain a more grounded explanation. They argue that the structure is the result of natural geological processes, including erosion, sediment compression, and tectonic activity over thousands of years. Despite extensive discussion, the debate has never reached a definitive conclusion. One major reason is the lack of conclusive excavation evidence. Previous studies have examined the surface and surrounding soil, but none have provided enough data to confirm either interpretation with certainty. That changed in 2021, when a Turkish archaeological team launched a controlled excavation of the site. Their objective was not to validate religious narratives or disprove them, but to scientifically determine the true geological nature of the formation using modern research methods. However, early results immediately introduced new questions. Soil samples collected from multiple layers revealed traces of marine origin materials, substances typically associated with ancient seabed environments. This finding was unexpected, especially given the site's mountainous location far above sea level. While this discovery did not confirm any theory, it complicated the investigation significantly. It suggested that the site's history might not be as straightforward as previously assumed. As excavation efforts continued, the team turned to more advanced scanning technologies to investigate beneath the surface without causing major disturbance to the formation. At this stage, GROK AI was introduced into the research process. Its role was to assist in analyzing large and complex sets of geophysical data, particularly outputs from ground-penetrating radar systems. What began as a supportive analytical tool soon became central to interpreting findings that were growing increasingly difficult to explain through conventional geological models. GROK AI and the first radar shock, something beneath the ground. The turning point of the investigation came when ground-penetrating radar (GPR) scans were carried out across the Durupinar Formation. This technology works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the ground and analyzing how those signals reflect back, allowing researchers to map structures hidden far below the surface without physically excavating them. At first, the team expected entirely normal geological results. In a mountainous region like this, radar scans typically reveal fractured rock layers, irregular sediment deposits, voids formed by erosion, and random subsurface shifts shaped by natural pressure over time. Nothing about the site suggested anything beyond standard geology. However, the results were immediately unusual. When GROK AI began processing the radar data, it flagged patterns that did not match typical geological formations. Instead of chaotic underground structures, the system identified something far more organized. Beneath the surface was a large hollow formation with clearly defined edges, consistent internal spacing, and an overall shape that appeared deliberately structured rather than naturally formed. As additional scan layers were added and refined, the outline of the structure became increasingly clear. The dimensions and proportions stood out as particularly significant. Several members of the research team noticed that the measurements derived from the radar data bore a striking resemblance to the biblical description of Noah's Ark, recorded in Genesis 6:15. According to that passage, the ark was approximately 300 cubits in length, 50 cubits in width, and 30 cubits in height. While interpretations of ancient measurements vary, the proportions described in the text are widely recognized. What made the discovery compelling was that the underground structure appeared to align surprisingly closely with those same proportional ratios. At this point, the atmosphere at the excavation site began to change noticeably. What had initially been a straightforward geological and archaeological survey was now entering a far more uncertain phase. The data was structured enough to be taken seriously, yet unusual enough that it could not be accepted without skepticism or further verification. As GROK AI continued refining the analysis, discussions within the team became more intense. Some researchers urged caution, emphasizing the possibility of coincidental pattern recognition or misinterpretation of natural formations. Others pointed out that the consistency of the structure across multiple scans made random formation less likely. This growing divide led to a difficult and unavoidable question that began circulating among the researchers. If this structure is truly natural, then why does it appear so mathematically organized beneath the surface? As GROK AI continued processing additional radar scans from multiple angles, the internal layout of the Durupinar formation became increasingly detailed and difficult to interpret as purely natural. The system began mapping what appeared to be corridor-like pathways running through the subsurface structure, forming a complex internal arrangement rather than a simple hollow or cave system. These features did not resemble random voids or irregular fractures typically expected in sedimentary rock. Instead, they appeared to follow consistent spacing patterns, forming interconnected sections that extended across multiple scan layers. In several areas, partition-like divisions were also detected, suggesting a separation between internal spaces, almost as if the structure had been compartmentalized. What stood out most, however, was the symmetry. The internal beams and divisions appeared unusually evenly spaced, maintaining a level of uniformity that felt unnatural in a geological context. Rather than chaotic formation, the structure seemed to follow an organized layout, as if shaped by a deliberate framework. This observation immediately sparked debate among the researchers on site. Some geologists argued that nature is capable of producing surprising patterns under long-term pressure, sediment compression, and erosion cycles. In rare cases, they noted, natural forces can create symmetrical-looking formations that may appear engineered at first glance. However, several engineers on the team strongly disagreed. From an engineering perspective, they pointed out that the level of consistency in spacing and alignment did not match known geological behavior. Natural processes, they argued, rarely produce evenly distributed internal corridors that resemble designed passageways with structural intent. One of the engineers summarized the concern in simple terms. Natural formations do not typically organize themselves into evenly spaced internal frameworks with repeating geometry. At this stage, GROK AI was tasked with running comparative structural probability models. It analyzed thousands of documented geological formations worldwide, including cave systems, sediment folds, and erosion-based structures. While it confirmed that symmetry can occur in nature, it also highlighted that the degree of uniformity observed here was statistically rare and outside common geological norms. The findings did not confirm human construction, but they also failed to support a fully natural explanation. This led the team to a deeper and more difficult question. If this structure is not fully natural and not yet explainable by current geological models, then what exactly is hidden beneath the surface of the Durupinar Formation? Deeper scans and the discovery of a sealed chamber. To address the growing uncertainty surrounding the Durupinar Formation, the research team decided to move beyond standard radar mapping and conduct deeper, higher-resolution subsurface scans. GROK AI was once again integrated into the analysis process, this time tasked with refining radar interpretation, filtering out background geological noise, and enhancing the clarity of deeper structural layers. As the processed data improved in resolution, the system began to reveal something unexpected. Beneath the previously mapped corridor-like structures, GROK AI identified a distinct formation that did not match the surrounding patterns. It appeared as a sealed chamber, positioned deeper within the structure and noticeably separated from the interconnected internal layout above it. Unlike the corridors and symmetrical compartments detected earlier, this section showed no visible continuation or branching pathways. It looked isolated, almost intentionally cut off from the rest of the formation, as if it had been deliberately enclosed or protected from access. At first, many researchers assumed this anomaly might simply be a dense mineral pocket, a collapsed void, or an unusual geological pocket formed under pressure over time. However, the team decided to verify the finding using thermal imaging to better understand its physical state. That decision quickly changed the direction of the investigation. When thermal scans were applied, the results introduced a new and unexpected layer of complexity. A faint but consistent heat signature was detected within the sealed chamber. This immediately raised concern among the researchers. In normal geological conditions, buried structures, especially those potentially thousands of years old, are expected to reach thermal equilibrium with the surrounding soil. Over long periods, any residual heat dissipates completely, leaving underground formations at stable ambient temperatures. Yet in this case, the signal did not behave as expected. It was not only present, but remarkably stable. GROK AI analyzed the thermal dataset across multiple scan cycles and confirmed that the reading was consistent. It did not fluctuate randomly, nor did it appear to be caused by sensor malfunction or external environmental interference. The signal persisted across repeated measurements. A technician further localized the source, estimating that the heat signature originated from approximately 8 to 8.5 feet within the sealed chamber. The reading was concentrated in a specific area rather than spread diffusely, suggesting a defined internal source rather than general ground warmth. This detail introduced a serious scientific contradiction. How could a completely sealed underground chamber, isolated for potentially millennia, still exhibit a stable and localized heat source? The question marked a turning point in the investigation, pushing the team further away from simple geological explanations and deeper into unexplored uncertainty. Verification, repeated scans, and escalating uncertainty. Verification, repeated scans, and escalating uncertainty. To eliminate the possibility of equipment failure or misinterpretation, the research team decided to run a full series of repeated scans across the Durupinar Formation. Multiple devices were used, including upgraded ground-penetrating radar systems, thermal imaging units, and recalibrated subsurface mapping tools. Each scan was conducted under slightly different settings and environmental conditions to ensure that no single instrument bias could influence the results. Throughout this process, GROK AI played a central role in cross-validating every dataset. It systematically compared new readings against previously collected data, searching for inconsistencies, distortions, or anomalies that could indicate technical error or environmental interference. However, despite all attempts at variation and verification, the outcome remained unchanged. Every scan returned the same core findings: identical location of the anomaly, consistent intensity levels, and a stable heat signature originating from the sealed chamber deep within the structure. This consistency effectively ruled out random error or temporary instrument malfunction. The repetition of identical results across different systems suggested that the phenomenon being detected was real, persistent, and physically present within the subsurface environment. As this realization settled in, the atmosphere within the research team began to shift noticeably. Initial excitement and scientific curiosity gradually gave way to growing concern. What had once been viewed as an intriguing archaeological anomaly was now becoming increasingly difficult to classify within known scientific frameworks. Some researchers began raising serious questions about whether continued excavation was appropriate without additional oversight from external scientific authorities. The combination of structured internal corridors, metallic signal echoes, and now a persistent heat source created a scenario that did not comfortably align with established geological or archaeological models. At this stage, even GROK AI adjusted its interpretive output. Instead of suggesting directional hypotheses, it began emphasizing uncertainty ranges, data limitations, and the constraints of current physical understanding. The system consistently reinforced that while the readings were stable and reproducible, their origin could not yet be confidently explained. Despite all efforts to reinterpret or dismiss the findings, the raw data remained unchanged. And as the uncertainty deepened, one fundamental question continued to dominate the investigation. What could possibly be generating a stable heat source inside a completely sealed structure buried deep beneath the earth, within one of the most controversial and enigmatic archaeological sites ever examined? As the team continued analyzing radar reflections from deeper layers, GROK AI identified additional irregularities in signal patterns. Certain areas within the structure reflected electromagnetic waves differently than surrounding sections, suggesting variation in density or composition. These inconsistencies hinted that the structure might not be uniform throughout. Instead, it could contain multiple material layers or compartments that do not match surrounding geological formations. Researchers began discussing whether these anomalies could indicate human-made construction rather than natural formation. However, no definitive conclusion could be reached. GROK AI summarized the situation as statistically unusual but scientifically inconclusive, noting that while the structural patterns are rare, they do not yet violate known physical laws. Still, the combination of factors — structured geometry, corridor-like formations, sealed chambers, and persistent heat signatures — created a scenario that remained difficult to categorize. And as deeper scans continued to produce new irregularities, one question lingered over the entire project. If this structure is not natural and not fully explained by current science, then what exactly has been hidden beneath the mountains of Turkey all this time? GROK AI and the metallic signal inside the structure. As GROK AI continued refining the radar datasets from the Durupinar formation, the research team began isolating signal patterns that no longer behaved like typical responses from stone, soil, or organic material. Instead of irregular geological reflections, the scans revealed a faint but remarkably consistent metallic echo embedded deep within the structure. At first, several researchers tried to explain this anomaly through familiar geological processes. The most common assumption was that natural mineral deposits or concentrated ore formations could be influencing the radar readings. In many regions, metallic minerals can create unusual electromagnetic responses that sometimes mimic artificial structures in low-resolution scans. However, GROK AI's comparative analysis across multiple scan layers made that explanation increasingly difficult to support. The metallic-like signals were not random or scattered. They appeared too organized, too uniform, and too consistently aligned across different depths and angles of observation. Instead of isolated pockets, the data suggested a continuous pattern integrated into the internal structure itself. Even more striking, the arrangement of these signals appeared to resemble reinforcement-like features, linear formations that could be interpreted as beams, supports, or joint-like connections embedded within the subsurface layout. This level of internal consistency raised a serious scientific concern. If these readings were accurate, and if metal was indeed present in a structured and intentional configuration, then the implications were significant. The formation could no longer be explained solely as a natural geological structure shaped by erosion, sediment pressure, or tectonic activity. Instead, it would suggest some form of deliberate construction. This possibility immediately introduced a deeper and more difficult question. If the structure was built rather than formed, then the methods required to create it would need to align with engineering capabilities far beyond what is typically attributed to the Bronze Age or earlier historical periods associated with the region. One engineer on the team quietly observed that the internal arrangement bore a resemblance to modern structural engineering principles, particularly in the way load distribution and spacing appeared to follow organized patterns rather than natural randomness. That single observation subtly shifted the atmosphere inside the research group. What had once been treated as an unusual but explainable geological formation was now beginning to resemble something far more complex, something closer to engineered architecture than natural earth formation. And if that interpretation holds even partial truth, then the question becomes unavoidable. What kind of intelligence or civilization could have designed something like this, so far ahead of its recorded time? Psychological shift, scriptural references, and escalating fear. As the investigation continued, the complexity of the findings began to take a noticeable toll on the research team. What had started as a structured scientific excavation slowly shifted into something far more emotionally charged. The combination of unusual internal geometry, metallic-like signal echoes, and the unexplained heat signature created a growing sense of unease that was difficult to ignore. The atmosphere inside the field lab became increasingly tense. Conversations grew quieter, and discussions that were once focused on data and interpretation began to carry an emotional weight. At one point, a team member referenced Matthew 24:37. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the last days. The moment the verse was mentioned, the tone in the room changed almost immediately. What had been purely scientific discussion began to overlap with cultural memory and spiritual interpretation. Soon after, disagreement within the team intensified. Some researchers argued that the findings were too unstable and too easily misinterpreted, warning that releasing incomplete data could trigger public panic. Others believed the excavation itself should be paused entirely until independent verification could be conducted. During this period, GROK AI's role also shifted. Instead of drawing bold interpretations, it focused on cautious validation, repeatedly emphasizing uncertainty while confirming that the datasets remained internally consistent across scans. Despite the tension, one decision eventually stood out above all others. The team agreed that indirect analysis was no longer enough. To move forward, they would need direct physical access to the sealed chamber itself. With that decision made, the atmosphere grew even heavier. The question was no longer just what the data showed, but what they were about to physically uncover. And as the equipment was prepared and the entry point approached, one final thought lingered in everyone's mind. What exactly has remained sealed beneath the Durupinar formation for thousands of years? And why was it never meant to be opened? If you enjoyed this investigation, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into unexplained discoveries, ancient mysteries, and cutting-edge science. Comment below. What do you think is really hidden beneath the Durupinar formation? And do you think it should be opened or left undisturbed?